Got some breaking news, and
What?
want to make sure it gets covered. Former New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, the Sandinistan, and his wife Shirlene McRae.
Oh, don't. Are they getting divorced?
They're splitting after 29 years of marriage so they can date other people without living apart or getting divorced.
Oh, so they're going to have an open marriage. Yay!
Shirlene McRae said, I just want to have fun, with a post noting that McRae was living as a lesbian when she met Bill de Blasio. Can these people be more ridiculous? The people that are chosen to run our major cities' institutions, could they be more absurd?
They're like Will and Jada Pinkett Smith. They had an open marriage, and how did that end?
Yeah, minus the talent. All right, well, getting back to the terra firma here. So Joe Biden, the big guy, Mr. 10%, he had a 4th of July message that he gave to the National Education Association, of course. The dutiful teachers union apparatchiks listened to Joe Biden say, among other things, this.
I've never been more optimistic than I am today. I really mean it. Never been more optimistic. There's so much we can do. We're on the edge, and the American people are figuring out what the other team's talking about, and they don't like it. So, folks, happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July. Steve Moore, he's talking about you. They're figuring out what you're up to, and the American people aren't liking it. Steve Moore, Govzilla author, economist, who joins us now.
Yeah, good morning, guys. By the way, my wife just said I can have an open marriage if I want. So woo! Guess what?
You can finally live as a lesbian.
Aren't you excited? Honey, I'm home and I'm a lesbian.
Wait a second. Well, actually, she's probably a little bit concerned because of the comments you made last week where you were carrying on about how handsome Gavin Newsom is.
I got a lot of response.
I bet you did.
And let's not forget what you gave up for Lent, Mr. Moore.
Yeah,
yes.
but anyways, Ann Moore says go for it. So I guess
I guess I shouldn't be so surprised, but I just find that stunning.
Yeah, I mean,
and grotesque.
Not to dwell on the de Blasio relationships because who the hell cares? But
she just wants to have fun, Dan.
Yeah,
let her get her drink on.
What about Biden though? You know, where the people are figuring out what you and Kudlow and Laffer and guys are up to, and they're not liking it. How are they liking Bidenomics as it's been rolled out over the last week?
Well, these are the days of wine and roses. Don't you understand that? I mean, it's never been better, apparently. And so, I mean, look, the problem is it doesn't matter what I say or you say, Dan, or Amy says, or what MSNBC or Fox News says. People feel the economic pain. They know that prices are up about 18% since Biden came into office. And over that time period, people's earnings on average are up closer to about 14%. So that's a 4% earnings gap, which means that people are poor. The average American is poorer as a result of Biden's policies. And that's an especially troubling, result because the economy should be booming right now. We came out of COVID. The crisis was over. Businesses reopened. People went back on their jobs. And yet people, we're just not seeing any kind of boom in the economy right now. So I think this idea that for Biden to go out there and lead with his chin and say, gee, the economy's so good is just out of touch with 2/3 of Americans who are really feeling, what Biden should be saying is what Bill Clinton said. I feel your pain, but I guess he doesn't feel our pain.
He doesn't even know we're in pain. Now, I know you're not a mortgage broker.
Exactly.
Right. I know you're not a mortgage broker, but 30-year fixed mortgages, is this the new normal, or is it ever going to go back down to maybe 4 or, 3 or 2.75% that some people had?
Well, the mortgage rate was about 3% when, Trump left office, and that was pretty close to that was pretty much a modern time low. I remember, I don't know, Dan, if you're old enough to remember this, but I remember, when I was in high school, the mortgage rates were 16%. So, the rates, 18, yeah. So they can fluctuate a lot. This is a direct result of the Biden spending spree because the Fed has had to raise rates 10 times. 10 times they've raised rates this year. Now they're saying they might have to raise rates another couple of times to bring the inflation rate down. So, I don't know. It's hard for me to predict where that mortgage interest rate is going. I would predict it'll probably go higher before it goes lower. But what are we at now? What's the mortgage rate in Chicago? Somewhere around 7.5. What's So that's still a lot better than 15%. But the housing market has still been pretty hot right now.
Yeah, our friend.
It's not hot in Chicago, right?
No,
people are selling, not buying.
No, but the talk of recession has subsided, and one of the market analysts we have on the show, James Perry, had made an interesting point in his newsletter recently. He writes, the evidence supporting continued market optimism includes improving profit margins, low materials input prices, and the ability to pass on to consumers the increases in their labor costs because consumer demand remains much higher than economists anticipated. And he says the markets are telling us the same story. They're comfortable with the current level of interest rates. Why? Because the Fed, despite all its bluster and all the focus on interest rates, increased its balance sheet at the first sign of trouble on March 14th with the rollout of the Bank Term Funding Program. So it is domestic, quote-unquote, stimulus, meaning government spending, that the markets like. And even though we're in a stagflationary environment, we're not going to see recession, and you're going to see potentially continued decent market returns. And that's the class that the Democrats are really appealing to.
So it is true that what's really been propping up the economy for the last year, at least keeping the head above water. I mean, look, let's face it. It's the last 6 months. 6 quarters, that is. The economy's grown a little over 1%. I mean, that's pathetic. This is hardly a boom or right now. For anybody to think that this economy is flying high, that's simply wrong. I mean, 1% growth when we should be growing 3 times that much is very little. So how is it that this is the conundrum? So people's real incomes have fallen by about $3,000 or $4,000 per family since Biden came in, when you adjust for inflation, and yet people are still spending the way they spent before Biden came into office. So what gives? Well, you know the answer to that. What's happened is that credit card debt and consumer debt continues to rise at a very fast rate. Maybe they're learning from the federal government. All you have to do is borrow and borrow and borrow. And when you've got $1 trillion of consumer debt out there, I don't think consumers can keep up this pace of spending. And so, look, I'm not predicting a recession. In fact, I wasn't one of those economists at the end of last year who said, 75% chance of recession. But I think we're just kind of in a malaise period where the economy is growing at a much lower rate than it should be.
Mm-hmm. And I did want to get your take on this as well, just because it has economic implications. The Supreme Court decisions at the end of last week, particularly, of course, the student loan program, the student loan debt forgiveness program, which, of course, you were an opponent of that debt forgiveness, as well as the admissions case, too, because that will likely not be limited to college campuses once there is more litigation on topic. But your comments on those two cases.
So let's take the one that's caused so much indignation on the left, which is by the way, you will not hear me ever use the term affirmative action. That's not what we have in the United States. We've had racial preferences. And I think that is a terrible, terrible policy. And I think, thank God, the Supreme Court said, no, we have to be a colorblind society and not. Look, I'm extreme on that. I don't even think the federal government should ask anyone ever what their race is. Let's just keep race out of everything in these decisions. So here's the thing about this. Everybody says, oh, my gosh, we have to have racial preferences for Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Northwestern. You know what we need? The problem for Black America is not the colleges, it's the grade schools, and it's the high schools. And when you have a problem, when you have a situation where more than half of the Black children in a city like Chicago or Philadelphia or Los Angeles or San Francisco or Milwaukee are not reading or writing or doing math at proficiency level, and by the way, it's even worse than that in a lot of Chicago schools. The crisis is in the schools, is in the government-run schools, which is why the civil rights issue of America today is school choice. It's school choice. Let Black and Hispanic and Asian kids and poor white kids go to good schools. I mean, how could anybody be against that unless they're a member of a teacher union?
Well, right. They've got to cover their tracks, don't they? They've got to cover up the performance of those schools. This is all the hand-wringing about, the college campuses are going to become whiter and more Asian. Well, what does that say about the performance of the government K through 12 schools?
And by the way, this hand-wringing histrionics about, not enough, Black and Hispanic kids will be able to Harvard. Go to Harvard, or, come on. We've got to be able to graduate kids from high school so they can be proficient. That's not the problem for Americans. Now, the other one is student loan for debt forgiveness. Somebody has to ask me why. Why are we doing this? Why should people be forgiven of their debt? If you make an agreement, you sign on the dotted line to take on a loan, you have to repay it. I mean, why should you and I and the people listening to this show pay for people who are deadbeats? I'm going to use that. If you don't pay a loan, you're called a deadbeat. And so the problem is the people. And if somebody can't repay their loan, let's say somebody goes to Northwestern. Well, what do they charge now? Like $80,000 a year to go to Northwestern, and you can't pay it back. Then you know who should be on the line to repay that? The university itself.
Right. Well, this is it's parallel to the cover story in K-12. We're not doing a job in K-12, but we can paper over it with racial preferences. We're not doing our job at the collegiate level, but we can paper over it with student loan forgiveness. Right? I mean, what does that say? It says it's a bad deal. That's what it says. Exactly. It says that $300,000 for Northwestern is a bad deal.
Yeah, take it up with the bosses.
And by the way, you guys know this, that the student loans and all these federal government student assistance and tuition assistance, they have not made colleges more affordable. They've made them less affordable.
Yeah. Subsidize something, get more of it.
Yeah, every time you give kids more and more of these, loans and tuition assistance, what do you think the universities do, Amy? They raise their tuition. And so it's like a dog chasing its tail.
But I tell you, I know a teacher who was celebrating, was so excited. Like, this is great. I'm going to go on this Hawaiian vacation this summer because of it. And I thought, oh, honey, cool your heels. Because Biden was just doing it to get more people to the polls. Because the timing's everything. And that's when it was announced during, I think it was the midterms. And, people like, oh, I love Biden. He's great. Speaking of Biden, so he promised to restore decency to the White House. Remember that? And a bag of Coke was found in the first they said it was in the library of the presidential mansion. Now they're saying it's in a common area where White House staff goes in and out of, and visitors as well. So who planted the bag of Coke, Stephen Moore?
Planted it.
How about
just left it?
Yeah, geez. I think my response to that is no comment.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it is suspicious, isn't it? They shut down on Sunday night. They shut down the White House. Everybody had to evacuate because they found a bag of Coke.
Bag of Coke.
Well, gee, how did that get in there?
Well, I mean, with all the Wall Street friends that Biden Incorporated has, it's hardly a surprise.
They bring party favors.
Steve Moore, economist, author of Govzilla. Steve, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Okay, guys, have a great week.
Thanks.
Care. Bye.
You too, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. On AM 560. The Answer.
Have you been struggling to find an easy, safe, and secure document scanning solution for Salesforce.com, Microsoft 365, SharePoint, or OnBase by Highland?